Section 5 of The American Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. Found Guilty by Josiah Flint Willard and Alfred Hodder. Among the graver misfortunes in the underworld is that of being in the right in a contest with the powers that rule. When a man adds to this misfortune the sheer folly of pressing his rights offensively, the gods have abandoned him. The gods had abandoned Howard Slipher even in the hour of his triumph. From the first his humiliation was a certainty. The precise time and manner of it only were left to doubt. Howard Slipher was a gentleman of the underworld who allowed it to be generally known that anyone who asked him for a fight would get it. A sensitive recognition of the claims of other people and an austere respect for them does not belong to the point of honor in the underworld. The point of honor in the underworld is for the most part concerned with a man's sensitive recognition of his own claims and his determination to have other people austerely respect them. And Howard Slipher was punctiliously honorable. He was possessed of considerable sums of ready money, kept with some trifling exceptions in strong boxes, the formula for opening which invariably included a drill and a bit of dynamite. The trifling exceptions were small matters of loose coin and broken rolls of banknotes which people of fortune, who had had no previous acquaintance with Mr. Slipher, stood and delivered to him at sight and on demand, and by a solecism in their business habits asked no quittance or receipt. His physique was a patent of nobility in which all who stood might read a power to levy taxes and to assume possession of his personal estate wherever he might find it. He was of the build that led men to follow him with their eyes and to speculate upon the amount of punishment he could take and could inflict, and while they speculated they respected him greatly, him and his manservant and his maidservant, his ox and his ass, and everything that was his. Captain Brigstock of the precinct was not a man, he was a deputy divinity, and respected nothing except the arch-deputies, his official superiors. Technically, there were sharp limitations to his constitutional powers over mere mortals, but in practice technical distinctions so seldom obtruded themselves upon his notice that his sense of them was apt to become quite vague. What the precise occasion was of his entering Mr. Slipher's domicile, nobody in the outer world ever plucked up courage to ask him. When Slipher was asked, he said that the captain had dropped in unofficially on private business, and added no comment beyond a malign grin. There was an impression in the outer world that the captain had made his visit expressly at a time when he knew Mr. Slipher was not at home, and that Mr. Slipher had returned unexpectedly. What was certain is that the captain made his exit from the Slipher domicile in unconventional haste, and that no mention of the incident was ever made in the public prints. He had reached the street from a second-story window, through which he had backed with such violence as to bring away the sash. This was the hour of the haughty Slipher's triumph, and the hour when the gods abandoned him. 3 weeks afterward there occurred a manifestation of esprit de corps among the powers that rule, which it was not pleasant to contemplate. Patrolman Hooper, of Captain Brigstock's precinct, had been murdered overnight while on duty, and not only in Brigstock's precinct but throughout the city the force was of one mind. It was not only that if an officer on duty is not safe, not a man of them was safe. There was an element of insult and effrontery in an attack upon a patrolman that stirred something more in his associates than personal fear. It touched their corporate pride. "Somebody's got to croak for this," Detective Swinton declared sententiously to a group of his brother sleuths. "I don't care if Hooper was only a flatty. He was a copper, and we fly cops have got to send some bloke to the chair for busting him. There's a push of guns in this town that thinks flatties don't count, that there won't be much of a kick when one of 'em's keeled over.
And they'll croak some of us fly cops before long if we don't learn 'em a lesson. It was a great bull somebody wasn't croaked for the killing of Patrolman Stimson 2 years ago. Stimson was a fool right enough to go up against the gang that did him, but if one of 'em had croaked for basting him, Hooper'd be alive now. I tell you, guns are just like kids when it comes to learning 'em anything. If they see it you mean business, they'll crawl, but if you monkey with 'em, they'll throw you down. There's some that thinks that guns will act on the level with coppers, whether they got to or not. That's damn rot. Of course, there's some squarer than others, but I've known all kinds for 25 years, and I give it to you straight that they ain't built to like us. They got the same class feeling we have, and if we don't croak one of 'em for doing Hooper, they'll get so nervy that coppers will be dropping in their tracks every month. They got to be called down.
The law for the powers that prey is that it is better 99 guilty men should escape than that one innocent man should suffer. The law for the powers that rule is that an example must be made. The powers that prey must suffer as a clan for an offense against the powers that rule. The clan must give up its offending member or must stand in terror and uncertainty of where precisely the hand of the force will strike. That it will strike somewhere, there must not be the slightest doubt. The orders of Captain Brigstock were laconic and smacked of his divine authority. He recognized no impossibility in the case. He spoke with the accent of omnipotence. He said simply, "Find him. I don't want to hear a word about difficulties. Damn the difficulties. I want him found." There were for the moment but the slightest indications to go upon. Hooper must have been struck from behind, must have turned upon his assailant, and in the scuffle lost his helmet. At least he had been stabbed twice in the back and had received a heavy downward blow in the temple, from which his helmet would have saved him. The mainspring of his watch had been broken and the hands marked 5 minutes past 4, thus determining almost with exactness the moment when he was assaulted. His assailant had been hurt and could be traced by blood stains to a sheltered doorway half a block distant, where he had seemingly bound up his wounds and changed his clothes. 100 other details were reported, but for 3 days these remained, in spite of the command of deputed omnipotence, the only ones that were significant. Then came a statement that a short time before his death, Patrolman Hooper had a difficulty with Howard Slipher, and that high words had been exchanged. It is said that Slipher attempted to break away when he found himself safe within the walls of the station house in the precinct. He was, at all events, soundly clubbed before he was locked in his cell. The blows given were accurately measured according to his power for taking punishment. It may be doubted whether Captain Brigstock had been more thoroughly bruised when he measured his length in the street. It is perhaps a chance coincidence that the captain was present while Slipher was being taught the power of the law. The evidence against the prisoner was worked up with systematic vigor. The negative evidence especially was significant. It could not be discovered that at the time Patrolman Hooper was struck down, the prisoner was not near at hand. Patrolman Gundy, in a misguided moment, opined that almost at the precise time of the murder he had seen the prisoner enter a house a dozen blocks distant from the scene of the affair. The outburst of disapproval with which this statement was received made Patrolman Gundy uncertain first about the precise time, then about the precise man, and finally about whether or not he had seen anyone. Patrolman Kennard opined that 4:45 he had passed a man who might be the prisoner within a block of the scene of the affair. The captain asked him what, in the name of things unprintable, his glims were for, and told him point blank that anyone not an ass could say whether a man that he had passed was the prisoner or not, and Patrolman Kennard became certain that he was not an ass, and certain that he had passed the prisoner, and not at all certain that the hour was 4:45 or 4:45 or to 3. A safe had been blown open in the building immediately in front of which Patrolman Hooper's body was found, and the prisoner's method of collecting the living that the world owed him was well known. There were a number of other people who employed the same method, but that